It started on a warm spring morning in the small suburban enclave of Maplewood Hills. The sky was a vivid blue, flocks of sparrows flitted through the tree branches, and the lawns along Elm Crescent were immaculately trimmed. The houses, mostly modest single-family homes with cheerful porch swings and bright geranium planters, belied a sense of peace and unity. People who moved here sought stability, often hoping for a neighborly atmosphere in which kindness reigned. Yet, like many suburban developments in the United States, Maplewood Hills was governed by a homeowners association, or HOA. Though many of its rules were originally designed to protect community standards and aesthetics, the dynamic of power within the HOA could become more complicated when certain personalities got involved. Lucy Albright, a recently widowed retiree in her late 60s, felt a surge of hope as she pulled her small sedan up to the curb in front of her new, powder blue bungalow. She had saved for years to afford this place, finding comfort in its quiet environment, friendly local grocery store, and a peaceful park a few blocks away. Lucy came from a bustling city hours south and had dreamed of finding a safe, community-oriented neighborhood to spend her golden years. She had no idea how eventful her life was about to become. Behind the curtain of neighborly smiles and freshly painted shutters lurked an undercurrent of tension that would one day fall upon Lucy like a thunderbolt. And at the epicenter of that tension was a single figure, a woman many privately nicknamed Karen, who apparently had no reservations about meddling in every aspect of Maplewood Hills life. That woman's real name was Ramona Hardwick, but many of the residents, under hushed tones, called her Karen for her condescending attitude, constant demands to speak to the manager, and relentless commentary on everyone else's business. With her perfectly manicured nails, a perpetual scowl curling across her lips, and a schedule that suggested she had all the time in the world to police every perceived infringement, Ramona stood out. She was in her mid-50s and served as a senior board member of the Maplewood Hills Homeowners Association. In short, she believed she ran the place. For now, though, Lucy had no idea who Ramona was or what sort of trouble was quietly waiting on the horizon. She only felt gratitude toward her new neighbors who had waved to her as she pulled in. For the rest of that day, Lucy moved her belongings into the home, occasionally pausing to admire the neat yards, the gentle breeze, and the faint smell of freshly mowed grass. She felt excitement about meeting her fellow residents and hoped to become friends with them, finding a new sense of community and belonging. Lucy was not the only retiree around. Maplewood Hills had, over the last decade, attracted seniors looking for peace. A slow shift had happened. Once a predominantly younger community with children on bikes, the population had begun to age into a quieter, more relaxed demographic. There were also still some younger families, but retirees steadily formed a strong portion of the population. In the serene hush of the afternoon, Lucy locked the front door to her new bungalow and stepped out onto the porch, looking forward to a simple walk. That was when she spotted the silhouette of a woman standing on the sidewalk, arms folded, eyes narrowed behind large sunglasses. Lucy smiled and waved cheerily. The woman nodded, not returning the warmth. Unbeknownst to Lucy at the time, she had just received her first silent scrutiny from Ramona Hardwick, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. Before long, Lucy began to hear murmurs from neighbors about the HOA Karen. They described how Ramona had a habit of scolding people if their recycling bins weren't pushed flush against the curb. She would peer into driveways to check if any oil stains marred the concrete, and she tallied how many hours a vehicle might remain parked on a certain street. These stories, though seemingly far-fetched to Lucy, were repeated so often by different people that Lucy's initial skepticism waned. Lucy befriended another older resident, Estelle McGuire, who confided a few stories about Ramona's infamous meddling. Last spring, Estelle began, Ramona sent me 3 letters, mind you, because I had a pink flamingo lawn ornament. Claimed it was tacky and against HOA regulations. I mean, who cares about a plastic flamingo? Lucy chuckled, but felt uneasy. Well, did you have to remove it? Estelle shook her head. I gave in eventually. The letters made me nervous, saying that the HOA might find me. But right after I took it down, I put a small flower pot in the same place. I think it's probably the principle of the thing for Ramona, not the actual flamingo. She just likes the power. A third friend, Dorothy Chun, who lived a few houses away, also shared her experiences. Ramona threatened to call the fire department on me because she thought the antique gas lamp near my stoop was a hazard, even though it was fully disconnected and purely decorative. Had it for 15 years, and no one ever complained. Then Ramona moved to Maplewood Hills, and everything changed. Dorothy rolled her eyes at the memory. She's got too much time on her hands and a serious chip on her shoulder. She also fancies herself the moral guardian of the neighborhood. Goodness forbid she catches you doing anything she considers out of line. Rumors swirled that Ramona was on some kind of personal crusade. Maybe she thought Maplewood Hills was her fiefdom, or maybe she just enjoyed the power. But Lucy tried to keep an open mind. After all, maybe Ramona had reasons for being so strict. Maybe she'd had negative experiences in the past. Lucy wanted to see the good in everyone. But that changed the day Lucy parked her car on the street for a few hours to attend an afternoon tea at Estelle's house. When Lucy returned, there was a note taped to her car window in large, bold letters. The note read, "Dear resident, parking on this street is restricted to guests and short-term visits. Your vehicle has been here for an undetermined length of time and is subject to towing if you continue to abuse this privilege. Please make proper arrangements." At the bottom of this typed note was a signature scrawled in black pen. Ramona Hardwick, HOA board member. Lucy stood on the curb, holding the note, utterly perplexed. The entire block had street parking, and she had believed it to be fine for residents as well, especially since she was just a few doors down. It had only been about 3 hours. Shaking her head and feeling a pang of anxiety, Lucy realized the stories were true. She was on Ramona's radar now. Ramona's daily routine included what the neighbors jokingly called her patrol. Morning or afternoon, she'd walk the neighborhood with a clipboard, checking compliance on everything from lawn height to trash placement. She rarely missed an opportunity to scold residents for not meeting her standards. Over the next few weeks, Lucy found more of Ramona's notes on her car, even when parked in Lucy's own driveway, pointing out minor leaves or debris that drifted onto the pavement, or a slight fade in Lucy's home address numbers near the mailbox. Each note had an overly official tone, referencing alleged bylaw infractions. "This is outrageous," Lucy said aloud to Dorothy one afternoon, brandishing another note. "She's complaining that my address numbers might not be visible enough after dark. We have streetlights. It's not like I'm endangering the entire neighborhood." Dorothy shrugged sympathetically. "That's just Ramona being Ramona. She thrives on power and intimidation. Don't let it get to you too much. Most of us have found ways to work around her." "How do you cope?" Lucy asked. "Keep up with your chores and try not to give her any reason to single you out," Dorothy advised. "Document everything. If she crosses the line, we can bring it up at the next HOA meeting." The rest of the board is not always thrilled with her, but no one wants to confront her either. Those words, "document everything," resonated with Lucy. As someone who had spent decades in an administrative office role, she believed in the power of proper record keeping. She began collecting Ramona's notes, scanning them into her computer, and marking down the date, time, and location of each incident. Still, Lucy tried her best not to let Ramona's intrusions define her daily life. She chatted with Estelle, pottered around the garden she was starting, and occasionally hosted small tea parties for the other seniors in the neighborhood. The sense of community was blossoming, and Lucy felt relief that not everyone was so overbearing. But as often happens with bullies, once Ramona sensed Lucy was an easy target, widowed, a newcomer, and somewhat shy, she doubled down. Minor complaints about Lucy's mailbox or garden ornaments soon escalated into condescending conversations in public. "Lucy, dear," she'd say in a voice dripping with faux concern, "it seems your geraniums are encroaching slightly onto the sidewalk. We can't have that. Someone could trip. I'll note it down and see how the HOA might advise you to proceed." Lucy would flush with embarrassment, stammer an apology, and promise to fix any issue. But inside, She felt the boiling of anger and frustration. Lucy had never had someone talk to her like that, especially not when she was simply living her life, harming no one. Little did Lucy know that the true storm was brewing. A single parking spot on Elm Crescent, just a few yards from Lucy's front door, would ignite a full-scale neighborhood conflict. In Maplewood Hills, each house had a driveway, but due to the narrowness of the streets, a small handful of curbside spots were also used, particularly by guests, deliveries, or short-term visitors. The HOA had an ambiguous policy about street parking for residents. It wasn't forbidden, but it also wasn't encouraged. Many older residents found it more convenient to park at the curb, so they didn't have to maneuver in and out of driveways, especially if the driveway was on a slope or if they were less comfortable reversing. Estelle often took advantage of one such spot near Lucy's bungalow. It was level with the sidewalk and offered easy access to the front door of Lucy's home when Estelle came over for tea, crocheting get-togethers, and friendly chats. Estelle had a bad hip, so the proximity helped. On one particular afternoon, Lucy was hosting a small crocheting circle with Estelle and Dorothy. Estelle pulled into that curbside spot around 2 p.m. They spent a few hours crocheting, sharing stories, laughing, and sipping lemonade. Before they knew it, the clock read 5 p.m. Estelle stood with a slight groan, hand on her hip. Well, I suppose I should head home. As she stepped out of Lucy's front door, her eyes fell upon Ramona Hardwick, standing at the foot of the driveway, lips pressed tight. Ramona's gaze flicked from Lucy to Estelle, and then to Estelle's car parked along the curb. "Good evening," Ramona began coolly. "You've been here for quite some time, haven't you? I've noticed that car in the same spot since this afternoon." Estelle's voice trembled, but she tried to sound polite. "Yes, I was visiting Lucy. Is there an issue?" Ramona's eyebrows arched in theatrical disbelief. Street parking is intended for short visits or for those physically unable to use the driveways. You seem to have been here for at least 3 hours, possibly more. She turned her clipboard so they could see the notation she'd made, pointing to the time she had first seen Estelle arrive. Estelle bristled, offended by Ramona's insinuation that 3 hours was excessive. "I do have some mobility issues, which is why I prefer the curb over the sloped driveway." Lucy stepped in, heart pounding. "Ramona, there's no official rule in the HOA that says a resident can't park on the street for a few hours. If there is, can you show it to me in the bylaws?" Ramona's smile was cold. "It's a courtesy and a strong recommendation by the HOA. We wouldn't want any unsightly congestion along these roads. Now would we?" She tilted her head. "But if you want to quibble over the details, you're welcome to bring it up at the next board meeting." Lucy took a calming breath. "I just want clarity, that's all." Ramona shrugged. "Well, for clarity's sake, I would appreciate if you moved your vehicle immediately after returning home next time, Estelle. That means you can't stay for extended durations and expect that curb to remain your personal parking lot. My job is to maintain fairness in the neighborhood." With that parting remark, Ramona turned on her heel and strode off, clipboard in hand. Estelle stared at Lucy in stunned silence, unsure if she'd just been threatened or given a half-hearted courtesy statement. Lucy's pulse was racing with anger. She tried to steady her nerves, comfort Estelle, and assure her that everything would be all right. But Ramona's words lingered. Her approach that evening was laced with an ominous undercurrent, something that said she would be watching. And watch she did. A week later it happened. A quiet Tuesday afternoon, Lucy was out grocery shopping with Dorothy. Estelle had decided to swing by Lucy's place once again, hoping to see if Lucy wanted help setting up for an upcoming yard sale. Since Lucy wasn't home, Estelle tried calling but got no answer. Estelle then decided to wait a few minutes, parking in that same curbside spot, thinking Lucy would soon return. She didn't realize that Ramona was nearby, watching from behind the curtains of her bay window just across the street. Ramona later insisted that Estelle's car was abandoned in that spot for too long. By the time Lucy arrived back in Dorothy's car, they saw flashing lights and a small crowd gathered near Lucy's curb. Estelle was standing beside her car, visibly upset. An officer from the local police department was there, quietly taking notes as Estelle spoke in animated, distressed tones. Dorothy gasped. "What's going on?" Lucy asked, rushing to Estelle's side. Estelle's eyes glistened with tears. Someone keyed my car. Look, she pointed to a deep scratch along the passenger door, a jagged line that ran nearly the entire length of the vehicle. Lucy's stomach churned. Oh, Estelle, I'm so sorry. She turned to the officer. Has anyone seen who did this? The officer paused in his note-taking. We have a witness who saw a woman approach the car and do something with her keys. We're investigating, but it appears to be vandalism. Estelle swallowed hard. She had the same color hair as Ramona, she said softly, and the witness recognized her voice. They said she kept muttering about parking for too long. It must have been Ramona. Lucy's eyes widened. So she keyed your car just because you parked on the street for how long? 40 minutes, maybe an hour, Estelle replied. I was about to move it if Lucy didn't come home soon, but I guess Ramona saw me arrive, then got angry I didn't leave right away. At that moment, Ramona Hardwick herself sauntered out of her house, stepping toward the gathering crowd with her arms folded. She wore an innocent expression that Lucy did not buy for 1 second. Why are the police here? Ramona asked with a veneer of concern. Is everything all right? Estelle's voice cracked with anger. My car was keyed, and we have a witness saying it was you, Ramona. A hush fell over the neighbors. Ramona's eyebrows shot up in feigned shock. Me? That's absolutely ridiculous. I've been indoors all afternoon, working on important HOA matters. Who claims they saw me do that? The police officer cleared his throat. We'll need to gather statements from all parties. If you have any security cameras, or if any neighbors do, that would help. Ramona sniffed, lifting her chin haughtily. I have nothing to hide. I just find it upsetting that someone would accuse me of such a petty crime. Let's see the evidence. At that point, Lucy felt a surge of indignation. She couldn't believe Ramona would stoop so low. Estelle was shaking, and several other neighbors stepped forward, offering to check their doorbell cameras. A wave of unity and sympathy rose among the seniors in the crowd. Though no footage emerged that caught the act in perfect clarity, the neighbor across the street did have a partial shot of someone who looked suspiciously like Ramona circling around Estelle's car. It wasn't conclusive proof, but it was enough to cast serious doubt on Ramona's innocence. Ramona refused to admit any wrongdoing. She crossed her arms and continued denying everything. Eventually, the police left with the partial evidence they had, promising to follow up. Estelle's car was damaged, but at least no one was hurt. Still, the entire incident left Lucy and the other seniors wondering if they were truly safe from Ramona's spite. One thing was clear. Ramona had escalated from petty notes to possible vandalism, and the rest of the neighborhood was not about to let that slide. The events of that Tuesday lit a fire in Maplewood Hills, particularly among the senior residents. Quiet individuals who had once just shrugged off Ramona's controlling ways now found themselves galvanized. If Ramona was indeed responsible for vandalizing Estelle's car, this crossed a moral line. Within days, a group of concerned neighbors convened an informal meeting in Lucy's backyard. Around a dozen people arrived, mostly retirees, though a few younger neighbors joined in solidarity. Estelle was there, supported by Dorothy. A hush fell over them all as Lucy gave a short speech. This is about more than just a scratch car, Lucy stated, voice trembling with emotion. It's about ensuring we can live peacefully in our own community without fear. If Ramona continues to bully us, to threaten us with fines, and now to commit vandalism, if we let her get away with it, we're basically inviting more of the same behavior. The group murmured in agreement. One man, Joseph Clark, spoke up. I've lived here nearly 20 years. It used to be a nice, friendly place. Ramona joined the board a few years back and turned everything into a battlefield of petty rules. I'm tired of it. We need to push back. Dorothy nodded vigorously. The problem is, half the time we try to fight her, she just points to the HOA guidelines. Even if she's twisting them, the rest of the board is reluctant to step in. She knows the system. Estelle stood, leaning on her cane. I'm not looking for revenge. I just want to feel safe, to be able to park without worrying about my car getting keyed. I want Ramona to be held accountable. She can't keep using these rules as a weapon. Lucy then shared an idea that had been brewing in her mind since the keying incident. It was something she called the Shuttle Buddy system. Shared rides, Seniors who needed to run errands, visit friends, or attend events would carpool together. They would coordinate so that no single car remained in a curbside spot for an extended period, and so that fewer cars cluttered any one driveway. Rotating parking. If one person needed to park on the street, they'd park in short intervals, then switch with another neighbor, ensuring no single car was ever the sole target. Community solidarity. Everyone would watch out for each other's vehicles. If they saw suspicious activity, they'd record it, contact the owner, and immediately report it to the authorities if necessary. "How does this help stop Ramona?" asked Joseph, curious. Lucy explained, "If Ramona tries to single out one person for violating a vague rule, she'll find it impossible because we'll rotate and share. She can't catch a single car that's been parked for too long if we're constantly switching around. And if she's on the lookout to vandalize, she won't know which car belongs to which person on any given day." A smile spread across Estelle's face. "And it'll help us look out for each other, so no one has to stand alone against her." The group exchanged glances, excitement building. This plan wouldn't directly punish Ramona, but it would make her petty attacks meaningless. If her game was to isolate and bully individuals, a united front would thwart her. Before the meeting ended, Lucy distributed a contact sheet with phone numbers, established a group chat for quick updates, and encouraged everyone to keep documenting any suspicious behavior. They left feeling buoyed by a newfound sense of unity. Maplewood Hills was more than just a battleground for Ramona's whims. It was a community that was learning how to fight back, standing side by side. Over the next few days, the seniors of Maplewood Hills began enacting Lucy's plan. Dorothy, Estelle, and Lucy took turns driving one another to the supermarket, doctor appointments, or social gatherings. Joseph Clark started offering rides to a couple of other neighbors for their weekly errands. Another neighbor, Gloria Patterson, volunteered to be on call for short lifts if someone needed to pick up medication or drop off a package. It took some coordination and a willingness to adapt schedules, but the group found that the sense of camaraderie made it worthwhile. They discovered new friendships and realized how helpful it was to share resources. Trips that might have been stressful for an older individual suddenly became pleasant social outings. A side benefit was that the streets looked tidier, which ironically might have pleased Ramona if she'd known the seniors were behind it. Fewer cars were left idling on the curb, and many driveways stayed partially empty. The real reason behind these changes, however, was far from Ramona's liking. It effectively thwarted her attempts to catch anyone in non-compliance. When Ramona paced down the street, clipboard in hand, she often found no cars to scribble about. Frustrated, she would hover around corners, certain that people were hiding something. But the seniors had agreed to keep the system low-key, simply assisting each other, rarely leaving a car in one spot for too long. Ramona grew suspicious, noticing that Lucy's car was missing more often. Yet Lucy was seen around the neighborhood, watering her plants or chatting with a neighbor. When Lucy did park, it was often in Joseph's driveway, or for just half an hour at the curb before rotating to Dorothy's driveway. One afternoon, Ramona cornered Lucy outside her bungalow. "I've noticed you're not using your car much, Lucy. Did you sell it? Or is something wrong with it?" Lucy smiled calmly. "I just decided to carpool with some friends. It's more efficient that way." Ramona's expression faltered for a split second. "Carpooling? Interesting." She glanced around, clearly trying to figure out the specifics. "You know, if you need assistance with transportation, the HOA can direct you to resources. We wouldn't want to see any confusion about the parking guidelines." Lucy maintained a neutral face. "I'm well aware of the HOA guidelines, Ramona. But thank you for the offer." Ramona's eyes narrowed, as though searching for a reason to push Lucy further. Finding none, she gave a tight smile and walked away. Lucy let out a breath of relief as she watched Ramona's retreating back, certain that the so-called Karen was scheming, determined to find a new angle of attack. Meanwhile, Estelle's car was safely tucked in her own garage, only coming out when she had errands to run. And even then, she usually had a neighbor along, giving her companionship and a sense of security. The group had come to see that Ramona's intimidation thrived on dividing people, making them feel alone. By joining forces, they were undermining her entire strategy. But Ramona wasn't done. As the next HOA meeting approached, Lucy, Dorothy, and Estelle braced for a showdown. They heard rumors that Ramona intended to propose new, draconian rules about parking in Maplewood Hills, ostensibly to control overcrowding, but in truth, to reassert her power and single out seniors who might park for longer durations. HOA meetings in Maplewood Hills were held at the community center, a low-slung building surrounded by a manicured lawn and ornamental shrubs. The interior boasted folding chairs and a small podium for the board members. On meeting nights, maybe a dozen residents usually showed up, but this time, word spread that Ramona was planning something big regarding parking regulations. When Lucy, Dorothy, Estelle, and Joseph arrived, they were pleased to see more than 30 neighbors had assembled, filling all the seats and lining the walls. It was an unusually high turnout, a testament to the growing anger over Ramona's tyrannical approach. Ramona sat at the center of the board's table, flanked by two other members. Edgar Price, the HOA president, a weary-looking man who seemed perpetually cornered by Ramona's relentless opinions, and Sandra Kramer, the secretary, who tried to remain neutral but often looked uncomfortable when Ramona dominated a discussion. Ramona wore a severe charcoal gray blazer and had her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She watched the crowd with a calculating gaze. After the usual formalities, Ramona cleared her throat. Next on the agenda, parking updates. Recently, we have had a rash of vehicles lingering on the street for hours at a time, creating an eyesore and an inconvenience for other residents. It is my proposal that the HOA enact stricter guidelines to limit on-street parking to a maximum of 30 minutes at a time for residents, with an extended grace period only for official guests. Anyone violating this will be subject to a daily fine. A collective gasp rose from the audience. 30 minutes? That was hardly enough time for seniors to run inside a friend's house for a quick chat. Lucy and the others exchanged alarmed looks. They knew this was targeted at them. Edgar Price coughed nervously. Yes, well, we'll open the floor for comments. Instantly, several hands shot up. Lucy stood first. I have a question. On what basis is this proposed rule being created? Maplewood Hills has never had a concrete time limit for street parking before, and this would be extremely unfair to seniors or anyone who might need a closer spot. Ramona gave a plastic smile. As I said, these are measures for the aesthetic and practical management of our neighborhood. We've had numerous complaints about cars hogging street spaces. Joseph stepped forward. Who exactly complained? I've been talking to people, and so far, I've met no one who supports these restrictions. Citizens have come to me privately, Ramona said smoothly. They were concerned about retaliation, so they prefer to remain anonymous. Estelle couldn't hold back. It's ironic that you proposed this rule so soon after my car was vandalized, allegedly by you. It comes across as a personal vendetta. Are you using the HOA to harass people? Some in the audience murmured approval, while others exchanged knowing nods. A flicker of fury crossed Ramona's face. I have not been charged with any vandalism, Ms. McGuire. I suggest you be careful with your accusations. This is about maintaining standards and ensuring Maplewood Hills remains a premier neighborhood. Lucy pressed on. If you implement this 30-minute limit, you'll be punishing many of our older residents who can't move their vehicles so frequently. Some of us need time to gather ourselves, or maybe we're visiting a neighbor for tea. The entire proposal feels hostile. At that moment, Sandra Kramer, the board secretary, coughed politely into the microphone. I'd like to add that I, for one, am concerned about the practicality of this rule. We should consider a more reasonable limit or another solution that doesn't inconvenience so many. Edgar Price nodded slightly, reading the room. The wave of discontent was palpable. Let's hold off on voting for a moment, he suggested. We should perhaps table this proposal and form a committee to evaluate the real needs of the community. Ramona began to protest, but the crowd's reaction was deafening in its unity. People spoke up, complaining about how this new rule would be detrimental, how it was unneighborly, and how it seemed specifically crafted to target certain individuals. Overwhelmed, Ramona tightened her jaw. For once, she was not in complete control. With an air of forced politeness, Edgar moved to the next agenda item. Ramona said little for the rest of the meeting, only glaring at Lucy and the other seniors whenever she could. Although the stricter parking rule was not passed, the tension within the room was tangible. Ramona was like a volcano ready to erupt. After the meeting adjourned, Lucy and Estelle left together, feeling both relieved that the proposal had stalled and uneasy about Ramona's next move. "She won't give up," Estelle murmured. Lucy nodded. The storm still raged, but for now, they had withstood the brunt of it. The following week, life in Maplewood Hills continued in a strange lull. The seniors maintained their Shuttle Buddy system, rotating rides, rarely leaving cars on the street for too long. Ramona's attempts to find fresh targets seemed thwarted at every turn. She took photos of random cars, only to discover they belonged to out-of-town guests or were parked for valid reasons. Meanwhile, the police investigation into Estelle's vandalized car remained open. A couple of neighbors came forward with partial doorbell footage, though nothing definitively capturing Ramona's face as the culprit. Nonetheless, it was enough circumstantial evidence to keep the rumor mill swirling and to keep Ramona under a cloud of suspicion. One quiet afternoon, Lucy was tending to her small rose bushes when she noticed two figures approaching: Edgar Price and Sandra Kramer, the HOA president and secretary. Curious, Lucy set down her clippers and greeted them. Edgar cleared his throat. "Lucy, sorry to bother you at home. We just wanted to speak about a few things. May we come inside?" "Of course." Confused, Lucy guided them into her living room. She offered them seats. Dorothy, who was visiting, made a pot of tea. Sandra began, somewhat sheepishly. "We're aware of the tension between you and Ramona, and we know the seniors have had issues with her approach." She tried to phrase it diplomatically. Edgar picked up the thread. "We wanted you to know that the board, as a whole, has taken note of her aggressive behavior. Ramona's proposals, the stories from neighbors, and now the vandalism allegations have put her under scrutiny. While there's no direct proof of the vandalism, we're aware that she is making people uncomfortable." Lucy glanced at Dorothy, who raised an eyebrow. This was unexpected progress. "So, what does that mean for her position on the board?" Edgar exhaled, looking suddenly very tired. "We can't remove her from the board without cause or a majority vote, but we do have the power to restrict certain responsibilities. For instance, we can form committees that exclude her oversight, especially regarding parking and property compliance." Sandra nodded. "It's a start. Ramona can remain on the board, but if she's not allowed to manage or enforce those specific rules, she'll have less opportunity to antagonize people. We want to propose this at an upcoming board meeting and see if we can find a majority in favor." Relief and gratitude flooded Lucy's chest. That would be wonderful, honestly. She should be held accountable for her actions, at least in some capacity. Dorothy chimed in. "If you need statements, I'm sure many of us would be happy to write letters or speak on record about her behavior." Edgar smiled weakly. "That may help. The more official documentation we have, the better. Ramona tends to hide behind official procedures, so we'll need official channels to check her power." After finishing their tea, Edgar and Sandra thanked Lucy and Dorothy for their time. They left with a promise to call another meeting soon. For the first time in months, Lucy felt genuine hope that Ramona's reign of terror might be coming to an end. Of course, they were also aware that cornered animals often lash out the hardest. Ramona would not be pleased if her powers were taken away. They had to remain vigilant. The final confrontation came sooner than anyone expected. One evening, as Lucy strolled down Elm Crescent with Estelle, enjoying the mild weather, they spotted Ramona confronting a younger neighbor, Kevin Mills, who had recently moved in with his wife and baby daughter. Kevin had parked on the street for about an hour while unloading groceries, and Ramona was berating him in her usual commanding style. "You cannot just park here indefinitely, you know," Ramona snapped. "We have rules in Maplewood Hills, and we will not tolerate." Kevin, exhausted from a long day, stood there, arms laden with grocery bags, eyes blazing. "I've been here less than an hour, lady. My wife needed me to help with the baby. Do you have no compassion at all?" Ramona's voice rose. "Your domestic situation is not my problem. You need to move this car or face a fine. I've already noted your license plate." A small crowd began to gather, alerted by the commotion. Lucy and Estelle stopped, outraged by Ramona's lack of empathy. Joseph Clark arrived, as did Dorothy. More people trickled out of their homes, drawn by Ramona's raised voice. Suddenly, Kevin set down the grocery bags, rage boiling over. "I'm done listening to your threats. Go ahead, call the tow company, call the cops, whatever you want. I know my rights, and I know the HOA bylaws don't forbid me from parking on the street to unload groceries." Ramona's expression twisted with fury. She stepped forward, brandishing her clipboard menacingly. "You dare speak to me like that? I'm on the board. I keep this neighborhood pristine." A chorus of voices rose from the neighbors, confronting Ramona. "Leave him alone. Quit harassing us. No one wants your fear-mongering." The tension crackled in the air, a collective stand against the tyranny of one woman. And then, as if on cue, Edgar Price and Sandra Kramer appeared, accompanied by a couple of other board members. Edgar raised a hand, voice loud and clear. "Enough, Ramona. You are not authorized to confront residents like this." Ramona spun around. "Edgar, how dare you? I'm a duly elected board member." Sandra stepped forward. "Effective immediately, we are reassigning your responsibilities regarding compliance and regulations. The board has reviewed multiple complaints and concerns about your conduct." She held up a folder thick with papers, affidavits from neighbors, and transcripts of complaints. Edgar nodded. "We have the votes. You're no longer in charge of parking oversight, nor do you have the authority to impose fines or distribute citations." For a moment, Ramona stood there, stunned, her face reddening. She opened her mouth to protest, but the wave of indignation from the onlooking neighbors left her speechless. Kevin quietly picked up his grocery bags. Lucy and Estelle watched, hearts pounding, as Ramona's power and control were stripped away in front of everyone. A hush filled the street. Finally, Ramona tossed her clipboard onto the pavement with a clatter. In a bitter tone, she spat. "You'll regret this. All of you." And with that, she marched away, retreating into her house. A collective exhale seemed to pass through the crowd. People turned to each other, relief filling their eyes. Kevin thanked Edgar and Sandra. Lucy and Dorothy exchanged hopeful smiles. Estelle blinked back tears of joy this time. Though Ramona remained a board member, her wings were effectively clipped. The more severe aspects of her aggression, her attempts to control parking and issue fines, were out of her grasp. And while no one could prove her guilt in the vandalism of Estelle's car, the suspicious evidence and the avalanche of complaints had knocked her off her perch. In the weeks that followed, Maplewood Hills felt lighter. Estelle's car was repaired. The seniors continued their Shuttle Buddy system out of convenience and friendship, and Kevin found no more hostile notes on his windshield. Ramona still lived in the neighborhood, but she mostly kept to herself, rarely venturing out with that dreaded clipboard. A caretaker might occasionally be seen tending her lawn, but she no longer confronted passersby. The happiest outcome of the entire ordeal was the strengthened bonds among the residents. The seniors had formed a tight-knit support network, and even the younger families felt a renewed sense of unity. The tension Ramona had created transformed into solidarity against meddling and aggression. One sunny afternoon, Lucy hosted a celebration in her backyard, a modest potluck with an impressive spread of casseroles, fruit salads, and chocolate cakes. Estelle, Dorothy, Joseph, Kevin, and many other neighbors joined. There was music, cheerful conversation, and gentle laughter. Here, friendships had bloomed out of adversity. As Lucy sat in a folding chair, sipping iced tea, she couldn't help recalling her first day in Maplewood Hills, how hopeful she'd been, yet unaware of the trouble looming over the community. Now, despite the challenges, her hope had become reality. Maplewood Hills was indeed a neighborly place where people cared for each other, looked out for each other, and stood together to defend their rights. When the party ended, Lucy walked Estelle out to her newly repaired car. The paint gleamed, a reminder that even damaged things can be restored. Estelle hugged Lucy, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "If not for you and everyone uniting, I might have felt defeated. But we showed Ramona that community matters more than fear." Lucy patted Estelle's hand gently. "We sure did, and I believe we'll always stand up for one another from now on." A moment later, Estelle drove off, rolling down the quiet street of Maplewood Hills without fear of petty retaliation. And Lucy, watching her leave, felt a surge of peace and satisfaction. Beneath the pink and golden hues of the setting sun, Maplewood Hills had found its harmony once more. A happy ending rooted in collective courage, neighborly compassion, and the unbreakable spirit of a community that refused to bow to one self-appointed Karen.